Hi, I'm Denny Stockdale, and today with me is Colleen Baldrica, and it's my pleasure to have you here today. She wrote a great little book, Tree-Spirited Woman. So tell me all about this. Let's start with the prologue, when you first meet the tree-spirited woman.
First of all, in the book there's a lot of truth. It is a story. But my grandmother was raised on the White Earth Indian Reservation, her and her 5 sisters. And when my grandmother lived with me, and she was my significant person. And when my grandmother died, she had a hope chest. And I went in there and I opened it up, and there were these, I called them doilies because she would go to mass and I'd put them on my head, and she would pin them on, and she'd have some shawls in there, and she had some photo albums. And in there, I say there was a letter that grandmother wrote. And everything in the letter is what grandma had told me at some point in my life. And that is how it kind of began. And the first prologue talks about my grandmother, and it talks about my Indian heritage and my growing up a bit. And then I get into the first chapter, and I get to meet Tree-Spirited Woman.
Okay. Now, in that chest, wasn't there a journal?
Actually, in real life, there was not the journal.
Okay.
And I needed to do that for the story. But yet the letter that was in there was everything, it was a composite of everything my grandmother had said with me and shared with me.
Okay.
And the journal was what I needed to do to make the story come alive. So there's a lot of truth that's woven in constantly between the story and reality.
Okay.
There's a lot of truth.
Yeah, I loved your book. And it's got an underlying theme, which I think is a pattern of life for you to a degree. Was this somewhat of a memoir for you?
It was somewhat of a memoir. The name Tree-Spirited Woman was actually given to me by a Lakota medicine man. His name was Charlie. And I had started college, and I was an older student, and I met Charlie. And Charlie I met him one quarter, and we only knew each other for the short time. And he gave me the name Tree-Spirited Woman because of a situation out in the woods that had happened. And he said, you know, that is a powerful name, and you've got a powerful sign, and I am giving you the name. And it was a few years later, I had this dream. And the dream said, you are going to write this book, and it is called Tree-Spirited Woman.
Wow.
And it will be between a young woman and an older woman, and it will be sharing the wisdom. But I also knew that I wasn't ready. I needed to live life. So it was probably about another 15 years before the book even began.
Sure.
And so that is where the story began.
Okay.
In that part of it.
And in the book, when you first met the Tree-Spirited Woman, it was deep in the woods.
Yes.
Was that a metaphor for where you might have been at the time?
Part of a metaphor. It was the woods are used. The whole thing takes
what I'm
place.
thinking of here, Colleen, is like the inner journey.
Yes.
You know, going inside to reflect on the answers or on the questions.
Yes. The answers, everything was reflected. Everything takes place in the woods. The woods were a constant metaphor. Tree-Spirited Woman used the trees as a metaphor. She talked about the seasons. She talked about what each season meant. She talked about the buds of the trees are like the new birth of children. She talked about all of the different things. So yes, the woods are used as a constant metaphor. They're a constant teaching tool. In the Native American culture, everything that can be taught can be learned through nature. And it doesn't matter what it is. Whether it's watching how organizations work, if it's working about letting go, if it's working about dying, everything you need to learn is taught in nature. And so the book reflects a lot of that.
Okay. That's great. That's great. I really like that. And in here, you've got so many good nuggets. One of the ones I really liked was when you were talking about the gift of listening. And here you say, you had the phrase, listening does not cost money. it's a gift that we can give freely,
Yes.
and it's deeply received.
Yes.
So tell me about that lesson a little more.
The gift of listening, to me, listening is the best gift you can give anyone. It's free, it costs nothing. And yet, so often, people think we're listening, but they're not. Being a good listener is something that people need to learn. It isn't something that comes always natural. Most people want to hear about what they're going to say next, or they're going to talk. And how we communicate, there are basically 3 major ways we communicate. You know, first is with words, and then there's tone, and then there's body language. And if you were going to put a pie chart,
Sure.
and you're going to put up a pie chart, and you are going to break it up, the biggest part of the way we communicate with people is our body language.
Right.
Next is tone, the last is our words. And how we learn to listen, whether it's leaning forward, not worrying about what we're going to say next, how we're going to be there for that person. You know, I used to have in my office, I would sit back and somebody would call in and they'd say, okay, Colleen, do you have a minute? I would literally turn away from my computer, I would put my feet kind of up, and I would say, I'm listening. Because it was so easy to multitask when I'm on the phone, nobody can see what I'm doing, it's there, you know, I can kind of fake it, but I really wasn't able to hear and really understand. So I try to make a point of always giving the gift of listening to anyone I come in contact with, and to really try to hear what they're saying. And so I really believe that when you give that gift of listening to your children, to your friends, to strangers, you are giving them the best gift you can give to them. Because most often people want to be heard.
Oh, absolutely.
And feel they're really listened to.
Absolutely. And I'll bet people have really resonated with that chapter as well as some of the other ones.
Yes.
In there you also talk about relationships, which I found a fascinating chapter. And you talked about an episode where you had something happen with a cashier at a grocery store.
Oh, yes, and that really happened.
And I believe that.
It talked about relationships. And the part about relationships, the book actually, each chapter is very, very short. They're no more than 3 pages, 4 pages at the very most. And they're filled with a lot of life lessons and wisdom and things to sit back and go, wow, I needed to hear that. And in relationships, Tree-Spirited Woman is explaining that there are no coincidences as to why people are put into our lives. They may be put into our lives not for what I need to learn, but for maybe what that person needs to learn. And she's talking about this to me, and I'm thinking about a situation that really did happen. I was in the grocery store, and I was in a hurry like I can be, and I'm ready to check out, and I'm kind of going, and the cashier says, I'm closing. I was not very nice. I was really kind of a creep, and I kind of threw my stuff down and I said something, and then I felt so bad. She goes, well, I'll get the manager. I felt so awful, but at the time I was just, well, after my, kind of the episode with Tree-Spirited Woman, then I went back, and I actually did go back. The woman wasn't at the store. And so I went back the next day, and she was there. And I walked up to her and I said, excuse me, but I was in here the other 2 days ago, and I wasn't very nice, and I need to apologize to you. And she just was taken aback. And she goes, well, it's okay. Everybody has a bad day. And I looked at her and I said, you're right. Everybody does have a bad day, but it wasn't all right for me to take it out on you. And I'm sorry. And that really did happen, Denny. And it made me realize, because so often we meet people, whether if we're having a crabby day or not, and if you're being crabby, that might be the only time you've come in contact with that person, and now their opinion of you, that's all they have to force, that's all they have to judge it on.
Right.
And it was like, is that how I want that person to remember me? So.
Yeah,
That is a story.
Yeah, and you do give books away once in a while, don't you?
I do give books away.
Tell me about that.
You know, a lot of times I'll have a book in my purse, and I'm a firm believer that those that are meant to read it will pick it up and read it. But there are times that I just feel somebody's supposed to have this. And I will go out for an evening, and I have that book, and there'll be something or somebody, and I'll say, I want to give you this. And I just give a book. It's a feeling that I think they will enjoy it. I don't just give it to anybody out there. It's somebody that I might just have met them. For example, we were out, my husband and I, not too long ago, and it happened to be on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, yeah.
And that was our first date. So we always celebrated like an anniversary in a sense. And there was this couple in there, and that was the day they met, many years ago, and they'd been married now numerous years. And she was just happened to be standing behind me, and we were talking a little bit, and all of a sudden, you know, I just thought, she's meant to have my book. And I just took it out, and I handed it to her. Another day, there was an elderly woman in the store shopping, and she was waiting for her daughter and her granddaughter, and she says, I wish I would have brought my book. And I thought, I was thinking, and I went out to my car, and I came back in, and I said, I want to give you this. Enjoy it.
Wow.
And so it makes me feel good to give them away once in a, you know, every so often. And
well, yeah, and by doing that, you're changing lives too.
I hope so.
You know, because there's so many good little nuggets in here.
Yeah.
There's also a little love story running through here too. Not, of course, between you and the tree-spirited woman, but it's also when you met Jim.
And if you notice, there's only one name other than tree-spirited woman mentioned in the whole book, and it happens to be Jim. And there's a reason for that. My dad was Jim.
Okay.
My father-in-law was Jim. My husband is Jim. I have a stepson named Jim. I have a brother, Jim. So Jims are pretty there. But I did it for my dad and my husband. Those were very important people in my life, too. So that's the only name. But it talks about my relationship with Jim. It talks about my feelings of not wanting to get into a relationship. Because having been in not a positive relationship when I was younger, and growing through it, it takes a while to learn to trust. And that is a huge part of my story, is letting go and trusting in the book. And I had to learn those lessons. And so when I had to learn to trust, I had to trust the relationship. I had to trust myself. I had to trust how I was going to feel, how I was reacting. And it's not always real easy, but it is something that with practice and constant work, it happens.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's also interesting that you have the metaphor of the woods and how you can go into the woods, or like we talked about a few minutes ago, you go into the inner realm to seek some answers.
Yes.
And you're trusting yourself for those answers.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Listening to the voice.
Right, listening to the voice within.
Yes. And trusting it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to teach, and I used to tell the students, listen to your oh feeling. And, you know, because you could be walking, you could be hearing something, and you get that, something doesn't feel right. Trust it, because we have that inner voice. And that's just one little experience, you know, one little example. But that inner voice is there. And I believe we need to hear it. And we need to listen to it.
Yeah. Well, I absolutely love your book, the way you wrote the whole thing, with the story about the tree-spirited woman and the conversations that you and she would have. And at the end of each chapter, you also have a little letter, or two letters sometimes, or notes, journal entries.
Yes.
And I thought that was remarkable, how you put that all together.
The journal entries, now the story is fiction, but there's a lot of truth in it. The journal entries all happened.
Okay.
Pretty much all the journal entries were feelings that I remembered having at times in my life, and they went with where I needed to put them. And so that's where the journal entries all went.
Okay, and each one is dated, and it seemed like it was about a year-long journey that you went through talking with the tree-spirited woman?
It was again, in the Native American, everything is circular. There's a beginning and there is an end. And the cycle of 1 year, that is where it took.
Okay.
And if you notice, there are many other metaphors throughout the book that you will notice circles, and you will notice circular. You will notice that everything happens in a cycle. And Tree Spirited Woman talks a lot about that.
Yeah, and I think you even talk about the seasons in there.
Yes, yes. Very big on the seasons.
Yeah, and the season of life, and towards the end of the book, well, I don't want to give it away, so.
Okay.
So, anyway, you have some different conversations with Tree-Spirited Woman, and I'll let the readers get into the book themselves for that. You also talk about age in there. And with age, you've got a great quote. Living as if one was old comes from one's beliefs. And I know I work a lot with the aging population and people in midlife and beyond, and I see some people that are really struggling with their age. You know, we're getting old and all that. But there's so many people like you that bring a youthful spirit to midlife.
Yes.
How do you do all that?
You know, I really believe age is a number society puts on us to tell us when we should feel old. And I don't want to buy into it. You know, yes, we have our lines. Some line earlier than others. Some hair turns gray earlier. Some lose their hair earlier. It all is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Age is how we feel. Yes, are we going to have days that we do not feel as well? Yes. But it's just part of our life cycle and how we are moving forward. How do I do it? I just believe that age is a number, and I am going to enjoy my life. I am enjoying it to the fullest, and I hope that I can bring people around me to enjoy it as much as I do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, one of the things that really resonated for me in that chapter was talking about movement and getting out and doing some exercising, or as I heard at the gym yesterday, physical therapy.
Yes.
They don't want to call it exercise there, or at least a couple of people don't. But I think that helps us with our aging process. And you also made a good point that there's a time in life maybe to slow down a little bit.
Yes. Yes.
And that's when we get more into reflection and maybe more connected with each other in some ways. And it's a lesson we can teach others as well.
Right. In the chapter of menopause, it talks about pausing. You know, life doesn't always have to be as fast as it once was as when we were a child.
Yeah.
We don't need to go at that pace anymore. It's a gift given to us to be able to slow down. For women, it's much more obvious and it's much more physical as well. So there's a physical thing, but it's also that reminder, slow down, enjoy life. Smell the roses.
Yeah.
Take a walk in the woods.
Yeah, in that chapter you also mentioned men go through the pause cycle.
Yeah. With the word like men and pause, how would you not expect men?
Well, sure.
And they, you know, it's part of the whole. But I'll let you read Tree-Spirited Woman to find that.
What's the biggest lesson that you think is in that book?
Oh, wow.
And that, I know that's a tough question because there's so many good nuggets. What is the ultimate thing you'd like to have the reader walk away with?
To let go and to trust.
Let go and trust.
To let go. Trust in your higher power, your God. Trust. It's going to be all right. And there's, you know, you can't control life anyways. No matter how much you want to control, you cannot do it. We have no control. We can't even control ourselves, heaven's sakes. Why would we want to? And if you feel like you are trying to control everything, you're going to not feel positive. You're going to feel more negative. So let go. Trust it's going to be as it's meant to be. Is it going to be maybe what you want? No. But maybe it's what you need. Maybe it's that phase. Maybe somebody else is needing you to go through part of this for their journey as well. I don't know. But let go and trust.
Sure.
And you know, reach out to others.
Okay. And that's a great lesson that people can take from the book. You know, and again, like I said, there's so many other little nuggets. And there's a chapter in there that I think you'd like to read from.
Okay. In the book, when you begin, the relationship starts out very apprehensive. The young woman meets tree-spirited woman, and she doesn't even want to show up. They meet once a month, but the young woman is so apprehensive, and she's going, but she doesn't really want to be there, but she feels she needs to be there. Now, I am going to read one of the chapters towards the end, and it's called Joy. And now they have been meeting for approximately almost a year, once a month. After our last meeting, it was obvious to me that tree-spirited woman was more ill than I ever wanted to believe. I worried about her health and didn't know if she would seek the medical attention she needed, or if she'd just let life run its course. I decided to confront her with my concerns about her health. Parking my car, I noticed that there wasn't anyone else there. That's the way it's been for almost every month. I was saddened that nobody ever seemed to take advantage of these woods. What a waste. This was one of the most beautiful spots in the area, and no one was ever here. Leaving the parking lot, I stared down at the trail. I hadn't gone very far when I saw a tree-spirited woman sitting on her blanket. She looked deep in thought, and not wanting to startle her, I softly called her name. It took a moment before she looked up. Her smile was inviting, and I walked over to join her. As I sat down, she said, "What a joy it has been for me to know you." Smiling at her, I told her I also enjoyed our time together. Tree-spirited woman looked directly into my eyes and continued, "Today, I wish to talk about being joyful and having joy in one's heart. If one is joyful, she will have peace within. Joy is what some may call happiness, bliss, tranquility, or a variety of other names. No matter. I call it joy. Joy is in everything. When one is open to life, joy will find them. Joy is a child smiling, a flower blooming, squirrels playing, a walk in the woods, or sitting on the beach. Joy is living in the moment." Well, I know people who always focus on the negative and they don't seem happy. Can they become joyful? I asked. Joy is within everyone. Whether to be happy or sad is of one's own choosing. One's thought process can become a habit. When one becomes comfortable with complaining or having stress in one's life, it's difficult to change. Negative thoughts spread like raging fire, but fire can be stopped. One always has a choice as to how one will view life. It is up to each to decide to experience or not experience joy in one's life. There are some who believe if you do not feel happiness, you do not have joy within. That is not true. Still, there are some who want to feel happiness and are unable to obtain the feeling. That is when Western or Eastern medicine can be helpful. There are others who do not feel worthy to have joy in their life. They too need to reach out and find another who can assist them in their journey. Everyone deserves joy. It is my belief that God wants all people to be joyful. Joy is in the friendships one makes, the dog or cat welcoming them home, the kind word that has been spoken, the deeds we do for another, or seeing the beauty that surrounds one. Joy is all around. Look, she said excitedly, as she pointed to the trees. One can learn much from trees. Look at those leaves. They are already starting to change color. They have lived a full cycle. In the spring, they sprouted new buds, grew new leaves and branches. They were trusting and growing. It was time of new beginnings, much like each new day. The weather warmed, summer came. The leaves turned a rich green, blew in the wind, trusted all would be well in the life journey. Autumn is now approaching. It is time for jubilation. The trees shout out for joy using bright colors, declaring the life journey is almost done. It is a sign they have lived and are not afraid of dying. The trees let go of the leaves a little at a time, and till the tree becomes barren. Then it is time for the tree to rest and rejuvenate until the next beginning. Wow, how do you seem to know so much and understand? I asked. Tree-spirited woman had that twinkle in her eye, and she said, "One can be taught knowledge, but one can only gain wisdom when she is ready. The day will come that you too will know and understand." My life journey has been like that of the tree. I have learned to trust, and my seasons have been rich. Tree-spirited woman looked at me. Her face held a radiant glow. In your life, you must find and experience joy each day. That will be your gift to others. She says this as if she wanted the message to penetrate deep into my soul. I started to ask about her illness, but I stopped. It didn't seem appropriate at the moment. I vowed to myself I would ask her about it next month. We sat quietly, taking in the smells and the drying leaves, hearing the sounds of the birds singing and the feeling of calmness and the joy that surrounded us. Tree-spirited woman took hold of both of my hands and looked into my eyes. Watching the little flecks of gold dancing around her irises, I couldn't help but to smile. She gently squeezed my hands and told me it was time for me to leave. She said she wanted to stay and enjoy some alone time. Standing, looking down at Tree-spirited woman, I felt so fortunate. My joy was for the present, for the time I had shared with Tree-spirited woman, and for the changes that were happening within me. With tears in my eyes, I bent down and I hugged Tree-spirited woman and said softly, "Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with me." She held me tightly before letting go. And as I turned to walk away, I thought I heard her say, "Goodbye, little one." I looked quickly back, not sure I'd really heard anything. Tree-spirited woman's eyes were closed. Her face was toward the sky, and the sun was shining. It was shining down on her like a spotlight. I smiled to myself, I turned, and I continued down the path.
Wow. That's quite a story in itself, just that one chapter.
Thanks.
And I really like the distinction you made in there between knowledge and wisdom.
Mm-hmm. You know, you can be taught something over and over, and people can tell you something, and then one day you may have heard the same thing 100 times, and all of a sudden somebody will say it, and you'll go, I get it. You now have gained the wisdom. You have heard it the way you need to hear it to bring it into your own personal being. Mm-hmm. And we can be taught knowledge, we can gain facts, we can understand logic, but we don't always understand the wisdom of what we need.
Sure, sure. Well, you've got a delightful book here.
Thank you.
Where can we get this?
Well, you can go to any bookstore and ask for it. There are many gift stores around the United States that do carry it, as well as bookstores. And you can also go to my webpage, which is ColleenBaldrica.com. Or you can Google Tree-spirited woman, and it'll come right up, be the first one right up on top, and you can hit my webpage, and it'll go right there.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks for being with me today.
Denny, thanks. It's been a joy.
It has been a joy. And this is Denny Stockdale, and thank you for joining us for this segment of Talk with an Author. And I invite you to read a book. It could change your life. And I encourage you to invite your children to read a book as well.